Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's episode of the ZodWriter Show. I am ZodWriter, and with me tonight, as always, is the co-host of the ZodWriter Show, Mr. Johnny Alpha himself. What's up, Johnny?
Nothing much, man. Just chilling, got boxing on the brain.
Oh, yeah. We're about to talk about an excellent movie well, uh, that nobody nobody asked for. That nobody
Straight up.
that straight up nobody thought was going to ever happen, nor was it on anybody's mind that it ever would happen. And I think it's important to talk about this because you all of you watching me know where I come from as being someone who was part of the hashtag release the Snyder Cut movement. These kinds of things are very important to me whenever a filmmaker gets to fulfill his desired vision when he makes a movie, when he or she makes a movie. And I feel that it's important to say this because I believe that without the success of the Snyder Cut, we never would have gotten this, and we wouldn't be getting the flood of director's cuts that seem to be permeating the home video market at this time as we speak. And I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty remarkable because I don't know about you, Johnny, but I absolutely love the theatrical cut of Rocky IV. I think it's a wonderful
Yeah,
movie.
exactly.
It has an almost it has an iconic, almost comic book feel to it. I love it. I love it so much. I must have seen it more times than I can even remember. I can't even count the amount of times I've seen Rocky IV. So for me, when it was announced a few months back, I think it was announced early spring, maybe summer, that Sylvester Stallone was working on a new cut or an ultimate director's cut, as it's called, of Rocky IV, and giving it a subtitle, Rocky versus Drago. I couldn't help but be super excited and pumped because you know how it's like they say, you never know what you want until it's given to you. Like, I honestly was just like, I didn't know that I wanted to see this. This was not something that it just like came out of nowhere. And it was, it had a very, low key release. I think there was like a Fathom Events for one night where you could get to see it theatrically. I didn't get to see it theatrically. I had purchased it on demand the very next day. I bought it it was on Vudu. And so I purchased it on Vudu and watched it. And you watched it the next day because I thought we were going to talk about it on the ZodWriter Show. I had plans to start to talk about it, to do a live from the couch and kind of give my thoughts. But I was like, no, this is big. This is monumental. I'm going to devote the majority of an entire ZodWriter show to this because I think that this is important. Hell, if you and I could get Sylvester Stallone on a stream like this, that would be incredible. But I digress. I think this is worthy of a discussion, and I think it's important to talk a lot about the legacy of this franchise, and does the director's cut, the ultimate director's cut of Rocky IV, add to the legacy, detract it, or doesn't do anything? It's just something else that exists. And these are all the main topics I want to discuss in regards to this movie. But before Johnny and I get into that, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the chat here and pull up some of your comments because you guys have already started commenting, and I appreciate that immensely. I thank you guys very much for sticking with my channel and watching it grow. It's just really fantastic to me. And Geek Studios says, "Hi Zod, what's up, Geek Studios? Good to see you." We got Integrity 101 in here saying hello, Zod. What's up, Integrity 101? Lucas Ironside says, "Hi Zod, what's up, Lucas? Good to see you." And Integrity 101 says, both Stallone's 1985 film Rocky IV and Rambo 2 were both almost superhero like takes on the character. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And I feel like the original Rocky IV, the theatrical cut of Rocky IV, felt like a comic book movie to me, whereas the director's cut does not feel like a comic book movie to me. And I'll get into my reasons why and what I what I think there, but uh yeah, it's like the fourth Rocky 4 feels more fantastic. It feels more like a comic book. It doesn't feel like it really happened. It doesn't feel it feels like a movie. And Johnny, I don't know if you agree with that. You've been kind of quiet. What do you think?
Well, I kind of want to, because of your topics that you laid out, I don't want to get into too much of how I feel about it not feeling like a comic book movie. But I will say that, like, they did, like, all that fantastical 1980s type stuff, because I've always thought of, like, Rocky 4 as, like, the most 80s one. Like,
Yes.
that's all gone. You know what I mean? This is straight up like it's made more to fit in with the rest of this series. It plays exactly like Rocky 1, 2, and 3 to do. Whereas
like
Part 4 had like all these kind of more fantastical things like the robot and shit. Like all that's gone, and that's okay.
almost like if it wasn't for the for the 80s montages, with the arena rock and the survivor songs and all of that, if it wasn't for all of that great stuff, you wouldn't necessarily, you could almost say, you could almost completely eliminate that, but there are still some very 80s elements to it. But there's also a significant change to the ending too, which Johnny and I will talk about as well. There's a lot here to unpack and to talk about, and being a lifelong fan of the Rocky franchise, I really was looking forward to doing this show. I just had to wait until both Johnny and myself had gotten a chance to actually watch the movie. Now, I myself have currently seen the Ultimate Director's Cut about 3 or 4 times already. Johnny got a chance to actually delve into it today, so it's very, very fresh in his mind. So this should be a very interesting discussion. And if anybody who has seen the movie would like to come in later on in the review, I'll let you guys know when I'm gonna open up the panel for people to come in and talk about it if they'd like to share their thoughts after Johnny and I have kind of covered our main bullet points here. Integrity 101 says, I saw Rocky versus Drago in theaters. It was super cool. That's awesome. And Geek Studios says, hope you have a wonderful night. Just shared your stream on my community page. I'm all new to Rocky. I just started binging it on HBO Max. I'm really liking it so far. Well, that's awesome, Geeks. That's great to see, because you're a younger dude, and it's cool to see younger people getting into a franchise that's been around for so long. I think Rocky is one of those franchises that spans generations and literally bridges gaps when it comes to movies. It's like Star Wars. Technically, it's timeless. You can believe in the story and you can love the story. And if you grew up loving the Rocky films like I did, and you grew up with these movies, you're going to love every single one that comes out because you're conditioned.
Well, and also it's got
love
the next generation type sequels with the Creed films. You know what I mean? Much like Star Wars.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And Ray says here, huge Rocky fan and liked the cut, but my conclusion is that there needs to be an ultimate cut with scenes from both versions. Ray, we will get into that a little bit. We will get into that a little bit later. We'll definitely touch on some of that as well. And Integrity 101 replies to Geek Studios and says it's one of the best and most consistent franchises of all time.
Except for Part 5. Except for Part 5.
But see, here's the thing. If you want to like veer off and talk just briefly about Part 5, I would agree with you, except for the fact I did get a chance to see, a work print / director's cut version of Rocky 5. and it's a way better movie than the one that was released. That's all I'm going to say. The one that was released to the public, the Rocky 5 that we know, is not a good movie by any stretch. It is the worst in the franchise. But if you watch this work print / director's cut that you can find on certain websites at the library, it is actually a pretty competent movie, and it fits in more with the other ones, a lot like what Sylvester Stallone was trying to do with this ultimate cut of Rocky 4. I really believe that had they released the version, the director's cut version of Rocky 5, that movie would fare a lot better. That director's cut would definitely fare a lot better to people, and it would
make a lot more
supplant.
sense. I remember when I was sitting right here on this show, and you're like, yeah, and there's Sylvester Stallone's doing an ultimate cut of Rocky 4, and I'm like, is that something people were begging him for? I mean, I thought like Rocky 4 is like the favorite sequel, right?
Rocky 4 is the biggest film in the franchise.
But it's the
Okay.
fan favorite sequel out of this. Like people love the first one, and then they're like part 4, like the second best usually. when I talk to them.
Right, exactly. And it was the most financially successful of the entire franchise as well, which says a lot. And honestly, that's why I say nobody was clamoring for this, nobody wanted it. And Stallone, I posted a link in the description for this video. For those of you that are interested and would like to watch Sylvester Stallone's making of Rocky 4, the director's cut, you get a lot of insight. It actually feels like a master class. It actually feels like Stallone is teaching you. You're learning. I'm learning more about film watching Sylvester Stallone, the process he went through making this director's cut, than I did when I took film classes in college. So
Well, that's the thing. People take him for granted, but he's a very smart person. Like the
oh my
original
God, he's
Rocky,
great.
he like basically made that entire thing himself. Like I think he did everything but shot it. You know what I mean? So, um, he knows what he's doing in front of and behind the camera. It's very impressive. I mean, he might not be the world's smartest man, but he knows how to do some shit. And like he's
When you
proven
listen
that
to
when
him
it comes to
talk,
film.
yeah, and when you listen to him talk in the making of the Rocky 4 directory, he goes into some really deep stuff. I mean, he really goes into the psychology of it all, and the bigger questions, and I mean, he really I feel like Sylvester Stallone has truly grown as a filmmaker through this process, and of course through some of the films that he's done in recent years. And Geek Studio says, I saw Creed first. That made me want to watch Rocky. Yeah, that's cool. That's great. That's probably what it's supposed to do. If you hadn't seen the Rocky movies, it's supposed to entice you to want to go back and see what you missed. And Ray says, R.I.P. Tommy Morrison. He deserved a chance to fight Mike Tyson. And Integrity says, hopefully Stallone attacks Rocky 5 next. Integrity, if he were to be able to go back and recut 5 and release the director's cut that's been leaked in very, very poor quality online, I think it would be a much better movie, and I actually hope that it happens. I really do, because this Rocky 4 experience has proven that Stallone knows what he's doing and really wants to make his films all kind of unify with one another and not have anything stand out as being like a sore thumb, as being drastically different from the prior films. And Jacob Ludi says, I love all the Rocky movies, including the Creed films. And Koopy Malik says, hello, Zod.
What's
And is
up,
that
man?
Johnny? And hello to all in the chat. Yes, that is Johnny, Koopy Malik. Johnny is here. Yes, indeed. And Integrity 101 says hi to Koopy Malik. And Koopy Malik replies, Integrity says Stallone also directed Rocky 2, 3, 4, and 6. And Jacob Looney says, which series is better, Rocky or Rambo? I prefer the Rocky franchise, but I'm also a fan of Rambo. I enjoy both, but I favor Rocky just a little bit more. And Ray says, I learned from former champ Joe Frazier's family that Stallone was interested in making a Joe Frazier movie. Um, Integrity 101 says, speaking of director's cuts, release the Schumacher cut and restore Superman 4. Okay. And actually, though, with Superman 4, you could actually go back on the Blu-rays or the DVDs. They did release all of that footage. They released it all. Uh, it's not the best of quality, but they did release all the footage from Superman 4 that was cut for the theatrical cut. So a clever fan
Hey,
editor could
yeah,
put it all
make
together if he wanted to.
make a sick ass VHS rip of it, man. Like that's how it
It
should look,
could
anyways, in my opinion. Who wants to watch Superman 4 in 4K? Not me. I'd rather watch it.
Superman 4 in 4K. That's what it should be called. It should be called Superman 4K, and it's basically just like an updated 4K remastered version of Superman 4 with all the scenes edited back in, and just like make it so over the top that you can actually see like the springs and all the harnesses holding Christopher Reeve because it's such high quality. Because remember the company Canon, when they made Superman 4, they didn't like, wasn't it Canon?
Yeah, it
Thought
was
it was
canon.
Canon. It was
Yeah,
Canon.
and the special effects look so bad. That's what I'm saying. Like, just do it for VHS. That way, like, it'll look proper. You know what I mean? Because I
Right,
think if you
right.
try to clean it up too much, it'll just look worse and worse.
Yeah, Superman 4K. That's what it should just be called. And you just basically, and that's how they'll differentiate it. Like this version of Rocky got totally differentiated where it's now called, you know, Rocky for Rocky versus Drago, the ultimate director's cut. I mean, it's totally its own thing, and you can't really, you there's no way you can confuse it with the theatrical version. So um and some people took issues with that. I don't know why. I mean, if you're gonna do it, you kind of have to differentiate it. I mean, Geek Studio says, I'll keep you tabbed, I'll keep you tabbed, got to work. uh Integrity 101 says, I agree, Lord. Lord Koj says, I also favor Rocky more than Rambo. And Koopy Malik says, that'd be cool, Lord Koj. Koopy. And then, Koj is laughing at Superman 4 4K. Which one is better, Superman 4 or Batman and Robin?
Equal.
Uh,
They're
uh,
great though. Good cheese, both of them.
oh
Good
yeah,
fun, just shit movies.
they're definitely cheesy movies. But Lord Koj says that Superman 4 was a little less cringe. And Integrity 101 says, I wasn't kidding about Superman 4. There's a petition. And the budget cuts were a blessing in disguise, because nowadays those effects can be fixed for pennies on the dollar. It's 134 minutes cut to 89. Yeah, yeah, and like I said, all that footage has been released. So theoretically, it could be made, and it could be reconstructed in the way that Johnny just spoke of earlier. So yeah, no stupid nipple scene, LOL. And baby girl says, hi Zod. Hey, what's going on, baby girl? Welcome to tonight's special Rocky versus Drago edition of the ZodWriter Show. Thank you all for being here. So let's get into it, Johnny. Let's kind of break it down a little bit. Just just give your general impressions, just your surface level general impressions of the director's cut.
Well, I mean, at a passing glance, you really don't tell too much different between it until you get to that end. But it's a good director's cut, especially if you're like one of those people that thought that the fourth one was a drastic department from the rest of the series. Because I know a lot of people who like the film, but they will say that it kind of doesn't fit with the rest of the series. This version really kind of just irons out those wrinkles, and it kind of just grooves like a typical Rocky film. You know what I mean? It just It goes from fight to drama scene with his wife, fight to drama scene with his wife. One thing that I'm really happy that I was worried that they were going to cut out was the part where she finally like backs him and is like, "I'm here for you." I thought that like they were going to cut that out, and the original part was she still hated that he fought and wanted him to quit and told him that he would never win. I was so scared that they were going to some cut the good part of her out of the film and put that old version of her character back in, but at least that didn't happen. So, I
Yeah,
liked it.
yeah. I was very, very happy with the entire thing. I felt like all the stuff that they took out, or replaced with, and he actually used a different he used different color grading for it as well. You'll notice that the when
Yeah,
you
he made
watch
it
the
look more
movie,
like a
it
older
more
film.
real. It
It looks
felt
more
real.
like it looks more like a 70s movie than an 80s movie, the way he colored it.
I kind of felt like he made the movie look more. I don't want to use the word modern in comparison to Rocky for the theatrical version, but for me, like what you were saying earlier, it felt more in line in terms of color and look. And I'm not even talking about the movie itself, I'm just talking about the color grading. In terms of the way he chose to go about it, it came off a lot more like the rest of the movies in the series. Like it definitely didn't have that, because like what we were talking about earlier, where Rocky 4, the theatrical version, has more of a comic book feel to it. There was a lot of reliance on reds and really to signify the differences between Russia and the United States. And there was a lot of stuff that in the theatrical cut, you will notice it is a stark difference if you compare the two side by side. And I did do that. And you will notice drastically different in terms of how of the look and feel of the movie from an aesthetic perspective. Like he totally took it on a more real world level, where I could see where you're talking about, Johnny, how it looks like it was filmed in the like 70s rather than the 80s. It has more of a, but and I guess in my counter to that is it just felt more real world. It didn't feel as much like a fantasy as the theatrical cut, based on the aesthetics and choices that Stallone made for that. And for me, I thought that was great. I thought that was great that he toned it more in terms of the look and feel of the other Rocky movies, because he was able to tell the story on a more serious and realistic level. Like there's some scenes that are thrown in this movie that just felt great. Like there's a scene where Stallone goes, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it. Johnny and I are going to totally break it down. So if you haven't seen it and you really don't want to be spoiled, you might want to go watch the movie and then come back and watch this on the replay. I hate saying those kinds of things because I don't want anybody to leave, but the truth is that this really was great, and a lot of the scenes that were added really did give more depth to the story and more seriousness. It had more of a real world, in my mind, had more of a real world epicness to it. Like there's a scene where Rocky goes before the boxing commission. They show a little bit of it in the trailer for the movie. Uh, he goes to the before the boxing commission and has to talk, and is talking to them, trying to get them to actually sanction the fight between Rocky and Drago. Actually, he wants the boxing commission to allow the fight to happen after Apollo is killed. And I thought that scene was awesome. Like I thought that scene added a level of realism to the film that we didn't get before. And they did a lot of little great things too, where it was just a line here, a line there, or a you know or even like a look or like some body language and some changes where they actually managed to humanize Drago. Drago is no
Yeah,
longer like this just this Frankenstein monster like moron like a robot kind of a thing. No, they humanized him. They made you actually feel for his character, and now it kind of makes sense why the way things ended up unfolding the way that they did in Creed 2. When you learn about, when you learn about Drago and his son and the disgrace that Drago is to his family and how his wife left him and moved on for money and all this other stuff, you get all of that based on the human element that you see in Drago. Johnny, your thoughts on any of that, if you please.
yeah. My favorite part that I think was added, I'm pretty sure I don't remember it, is when they have the meeting in Russia, and the whole time Drago's looking at Rocky, and you can tell he wants to talk to him. He wants to just actually like just speak to the man, but he can't. And they get up and leave, and sits there and like he's like, well, fuck, do I try to talk to it? And he just gets up and leaves. But like I like that little struggle that he had with himself, that he was afraid to get in trouble and stuff, but like you could tell that like he just wanted to briefly even just speak to the man, you know what I mean, before having to fight him. And I thought that was really neat. I really liked that specific scene.
I really love the way he was depicted, and it makes me wonder why. Well, I really don't wonder why, because in the '80s it was just all about the action and the MTV montage after montage kind of thing. They were going for a total music television kind of aesthetic with the theatrical cut. And I know,
Well, there's so much of that still in this version,
oh
though.
yeah,
I mean,
I
there's
agree.
three full long ass
I agree.
montages
I
in the
agree that
damn
that's
thing.
all still there. I agree that that's all still there, but there are some changes to that as
Yeah.
well, and we will talk about those too. This is the thing. When I think about it, I love the soundtrack to this movie. I think the soundtrack is just dope,
It's
and
hilarious. I'll
and I
tell.
still listen to it, and I still listen to it to this day. I think
Living
it's a
in
Oh, it's a
America.
wonderful soundtrack. It's a wonderful soundtrack. I especially love, the
James
montage
Brown,
music,
man. Hell
Hearts
yeah.
on Fire, or it's like there's no easy way out. All that stuff. If you're a fan of the '80s music and stuff that's, the montage elements in this movie, they're all still there. I know there were people that were worried that Sylvester Stallone was going to take that stuff out to make it more modern, or was going to replace the music with with more modern music and stuff. And he didn't do that. He didn't do that, with the exception of a few uh, Conti cues from the earlier Rocky films. He managed to keep it.
Make them longer, I think. I think the actual like main fight montage towards the end when he's in Russia, I think it was actually longer in this version than it was in the original, right?
Oh yeah. The fights themselves, and this is the thing, that the fights
No,
were
not the
tight.
fight, the montage.
Yeah. The montage, yeah, definitely. The montage leading to the right before the match. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. It was longer. It was a little bit longer, and it was a little bit more fleshed out. And we had the added benefit of Stallone deciding that the montages needed to be in black and white rather than um, full color like they were in the theatrical cut. And I love that. I love that artistic decision, and Stallone justifies it in his making of, when he says that he did it because the montages are the stuff when when Stallone is thinking about stuff that is Rocky's thinking about stuff that happened before, that's in the past. So because it's in the past, he wanted it to be black and white, so that it would have that distinction of not colliding with the reality of real time, which I definitely approved of. I thought that was fantastic. I loved seeing him in black and white, and I love that he didn't take out any of that 80s music. That was the thing I was worried about too. I was like, my God, if he takes out that 80s music, it's going to ruin the movie.
I don't know what he'd put in though. I think that Sylvester Stallone actually still listens to that stuff. You know what I mean? I think that that's what he puts on when he's in his car.
Oh God, I agree with you. I agree with you. He does. He obviously still listens to that stuff. But here's the thing. No, but what I mean about the music that he added, they were just like cues from the
Yeah, it
original
was old
Rocky score.
scores.
It
Yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't like he went out and butchered the soundtrack and like I'll give you an example of what I consider to be a out horrible director's cut. When I was in grade school, one of the books that I read several times was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And when that book was turned into a movie by Francis Ford Coppola, and they did a movie, and there was a beautiful score done for that movie. The theatrical cut of the movie has a beautiful score. It's wonderful. Well, decades later, after Francis Ford Coppola's father died, Coppola went back and recut the movie and added in, some scenes that were cut out. I liked the scenes that he added in. I thought it was great that he added the scenes, but he changed the music. He took out all the beautiful score from the original theatrical cut movie and replaced it with a bunch of generic beach music. So when you're watching The Outsiders and you're seeing, if you know anything about that story, and you're seeing all these dramatic sequences and things happening, it ruins it and almost turns it into a comedy, because while people are fighting and people are getting killed, you're hearing like beach blanket bingo music in the background. You're hearing almost the music that he replaced it with was almost like Benny Hill style music.
Why did he do that? Would he have to pay to use the score again or something like that? And he didn't
I
want to do it, so he just
he
used royalty-free
claims
music, or
he
what?
claims, and this is, I don't know what's happened to him in the interiming years. I feel like he got George Lucas syndrome, because I don't know what happened, but he claims, Johnny, and it's no joke. He said in an interview, or on the comment. He said this on the commentary track. I got to correct this. He said on the commentary track that he always wanted the music to be this way, because he felt like that music was more in 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 style at the time that the story was taking place. So he felt like it was more appropriate to have that music. But I think it's absolutely BS. And like you said, maybe it was a question of the score, for whatever reason, being too expensive to use again. Maybe there was a contract issue with the composer. God only knows. But all I know for sure is the movie's completely ruined. If you watch the difference between the theatrical cut, I don't even care about the additional scenes, because the additional scenes have no impact, because the movie is dumbed down now because of that stupid beach bum music you hear all throughout the movie. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I literally was really thankful for what Sylvester Stallone did with Rocky 4, because he didn't change the movie. He didn't change the music. You still had the ominous Russian robotic, foreboding music. You still had that. You still had all of the key Rocky themes. You still had all of the 80s montage rock music and that kind of stuff in the music. So on that front, I think it was perfect. He didn't ruin anything. Like Jacob Ludi says here, Hearts on Fire. Hearts on Fire is still in that film, and I'm very thankful that it is. And there's a lot of stuff that was, really, and even the stuff that was changed, that was, for musical cues, for dramatic purposes and stuff. I paid attention to all of this, and I don't think that any of it was done in poor taste. I feel like Stallone actually really
Well,
uh
none of it seemed like it didn't fit. It all
right,
seemed like you were
right.
watching a Rocky film. You had cheesy butt rock, and then you had like, your typical Rocky score, and it just, you know what I mean? And he put it all together like it and made it sound like it was supposed to, you know what I mean? Even if it wasn't the right song from that scene, because that scene doesn't exist anymore in this version of the film. So,
What's going on, multiverse of movies? Good to see you. And Ray says here, speaking of which, we want to hear Junkie XL's original Justice League score. He scrapped it when rescoring the Snyder Cut. Yeah, I've always been curious about that, Ray, just in terms of if the themes would have been more in line uh, with what was done with the previous movies. I feel like he went out of his way to distance himself from the scoring from those previous movies, but he still did an amazing job. I still thought that score was great. So as much as I would like to hear what he originally had planned, I'm happy with what we got. So I'm not really clamoring for it, but maybe one day we will get to hear that. How are you all? Oh, we're doing great. We're talking about Rocky 4. I mean, what's not to like? I feel bad now because I feel like we kind of pushed out our audience when I said about spoilers, and we're actually, because Johnny and I are really doing a thorough review here on this movie. We're going all in on the movie. So as far as the music goes, just to recap on that, Stallone does a good job with it. It's all still intact. It's wonderful. I think it's quality stuff. I don't think anybody will begrudge anybody uh, as far as the musical score aspect goes. But the Outsiders example I gave is just an example of how this director's cut, which was of that movie, which was called the complete novel, could have been could have been epic, because all the scenes from the book that were cut out of the theatrical cut that I wanted to see in the movie were put back in, but because of that score, it ruined the movie. And Stallone, if he wanted to put more modern music into the movie to make it more like upbeat and hip, like the Creed movies, he totally could have ruined Rocky 4. So so that just goes to show you an example of how important the musical score is to a movie. If you could totally change the tone just by changing the score of the film.
I agree.
So as far as uh, performances in this movie, I thought that the acting was a little better in a lot of the scenes that he used from in this cut in
He
relation
made
to the.
Paulie a lot more likable in this cut of the film. I can tell you that.
Yeah, yeah. And I read one review. I read this review where somebody said something about how they cut out all that great stuff from Paulie because they cut out the robot. Well, spoiler, Sicko the robot is gone.
Tragically, yeah.
And I
Nothing
don't
bears out for that one.
I don't really get the and to me, I didn't really, I wasn't bothered by that at all, because I knew they were going to go for a more serious, uh real world tone with this director's cut. If they um would have kept the robot in, you're keeping in 80s uh elements. You're keeping in the comic booky elements of the story. Like, that robot was not even in the 80s, when they had talking robots and robots that
People were still
could
saying
move
what the
around
fuck about that part of the movie when it came out.
back
Yeah.
then. Yeah, it wasn't like that robot was something you could go into your local department store and purchase. They had robots back then. I think there was a robot I remember having as a kid, but it was a lot smaller. It was called the Omnibot, and it would walk around. It ran on like a wheel kind of a thing, and it would just kind of roll around the floor and would kind of just do its own thing, and it would just kind of and it would kind of beep and burp and do all kinds of like R2D2 ish type things. And then there were the more expensive ones that were a little bigger that could talk and could move around more. But I don't think there was anything quite on the level of what we got in Rocky 4. I think that was just to show the how far Rocky had come, that he was so rich that he could get a custom robot like that for his friend on his birthday, and have it be so over the top and gluttonous in like a real gaudy type of sense. And that's why when I look at what they did with Rocky 4, the director's cut, where they cut all that out, I didn't miss it. To me, I was happy that it wasn't there. How about you, Johnny?
I wasn't happy that it wasn't there, but I didn't miss it. That's for sure. Because, like I said, the movie does a really good job of presenting itself as being very, very similar to what we already had, but just bridging the gap between what the fourth film was and the original three. And since it was able to pull that off, it didn't hinder it not having such a iconic thing from the film. Because a lot of people, when you talk about Rocky, they'll be like, "Oh, that's the one with the robot, right?" You know.
Right, right, right. And I think it was really a case of somebody just telling Sylvester Stallone, that robot in Rocky 4 was stupid. You have to cut that out. It really could have been just something as simple as that, because he's like, because I don't know. I get that in the original it was supposed to be funny. It was supposed to be goofy, and there's a lot of scenes that are taken out, but I feel like the scenes that were taken out are not missed, because this flows so well that the new stuff that's put in, and a lot of it is not so much new scenes as it's like new takes of scenes. Like it's different takes of scenes that already existed, but just a little bit bigger and better. Some of them are longer, some of them are shortened, some of them are like you get a whole different dynamic. Like there's that scene where Adrian is telling Rocky and Apollo that it tells them both that she cares about them and doesn't believe that Apollo should be getting in the ring again. And then there's this scene that happens almost immediately after, that wasn't in the theatrical cut, where Adrian gets up and goes into the kitchen, and Rocky follows her into the kitchen, and they have this whole extra scene that humanizes it even more and adds more empathy to the whole situation. It was really well done. I was glad that scene was there. If you ask me, Adrian got a lot more um, had a lot more emotional impact in this version of the movie for me.
Yeah, she was portrayed slightly better. I always have a hard time with her character because she's always running him down so much. It's like, did you ever believe in him? Like, like this is like for the fourth film in, and you're still trashing the guy. Like, I know by the end of this one, you're finally going to be rooting for him, but I don't know. I have a hard time with Adrian, but yeah, she was presented as good in this film as she ever had been in the series. Better than she had been. I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's on a level here where she finally does come off as that backbone of support that she needs to be. And like you said, the fact that scene where she comes back and meets him in Russia, wasn't cut out. Thankfully, that scene was left intact because it was very important to her character arc. And you know, I I don't, I have a hard time thinking of things that I didn't like about this cut because I think that it just flowed together so well. Like I really was, and that's the thing that I struggle with because I still really like the theatrical cut. I always love the theatrical cut because that's the one that we've had forever. But when you look at something like this and it doesn't detract from the it doesn't attract from what made the original one good, but at the same time kind of elevates it on another level and like you were saying puts it more in line with the rest of the movies in the series. It's kind of a coin flip for me. Like, gee, do you watch? So now when you go back and you start watching Rocky again, do you go back? Do you watch this version of Rocky 4 or do you watch the theatrical cut or do you watch them both? I mean, what do you do now? Cuz now it's like this one flows so much better with the existing series. It almost feels like the theatrical cut is I hate to say this, but it almost feels like the theatrical cut is in its own timeline.
Yeah, it would definitely feel that way now because how well this film flows like the other ones used to.
And PKL Entertainment, what's going on? Says, "Hi Zod, how are you? Additional scenes with Apollo and Adrian were good, but Stallone cut original parts which were critical to the story." See, I don't know about that though. That's where I would kind of disagree because I
Critical to
don't.
the old story, but like if you watch this film, you don't notice that there. I didn't feel like there was anything cut out that I
Right,
didn't.
right, yeah. I'm struggling with this one because yeah, the way that this movie is laid out, I don't see anything in it that makes me think that I missed out on anything. I feel
It
like
would be one thing if he just cut things out, but left the old scenes in. But like for everything that he cut out, he put in something new to replace and smooth over because it was like this flows like the rest of the films, and it doesn't detract from Rocky Four. But there is so much different stuff in it than there was in the original Rocky Four that I don't think it detracts from the story that is in this movie at all, in my opinion.
yeah, and I don't know necessarily what you would do. Like I kind of feel like, I mean, I get there, like somebody had said earlier that they'd like to see like a sort of hybrid cut of like Rocky 4 with the scenes, cobbled together in some way. But isn't that kind of what Stallone already did? I mean, Stallone basically took Rocky 4. He didn't trash Rocky 4. He made changes, but he didn't do anything that was offensive. I mean, I mean, it was just. I just think it. I just think it felt. I just think it felt. It felt right. It felt good, and it fit with the other movies, and that's very important. I don't know, and I don't think that we would necessarily be having a different conversation if this was the cut that was released at the time. I don't think that this would have changed so much, really anything. I think Rocky 4 would still have the iconic status that it has now, even if this was the version that we saw and we didn't never got
I'm
that
not sure
theatrical
about
cut.
that. I think this would be seen as just another Rocky film. See, the weird thing about I think Rocky 4 and why it performed so well at the time is because it had all that goofy 80s shit injected into it because they knew what they were doing. They knew that Rocky was getting stale, that they were doing this scene, this scene, this scene, okay, and it's over. So they really tried something rad with Rocky Four, and it worked. I mean, like none, like you and I both said, this film is not going to change how we feel about the theatrical cut. But but the thing is I think that the theatrical cut needed to be what it was to keep Rocky alive and be as impactful as it was at the time because it just really '80s zeitgeist like a motherfucker. It's as iconic as like Stand by Me or The Goonies. You know what I
I
mean? As an
know,
'80s film.
and that's where I say I'm kind of that's where I say that I'm conflicted, because for me, I love the theatrical cut, and that's never going to change, regardless. And I knew that going into this, that just because I love the theatrical cut, that's not going to color it. I actually went into this movie expecting it to be a new thing entirely. That's how I went into it. I looked at it as like a Rocky movie that we'd never seen before. I went into it blindly thinking, okay, it's going to be Rocky 4, so it's going to follow the beats of Rocky 4, but it's going to be very different because Stallone has evolved as a filmmaker. He's giving us something that he's going to give us some things that are going to seem unsettling to us, maybe just because Rocky 4 is so ingrained in our brains. But at the end of it all, it's still going to be a good movie. Like, I had no doubt that this was going to be an enjoyable, very amazing movie. Regardless, I wasn't. I at no point did I sit there, was I going into it thinking, "Oh, this is going to suck," because I love Rocky 4. So if you love Rocky 4, you're not going to go into the ultimate director's cut thinking that it's going to be a disappointment. And I'm not really sure how I've seen a lot of reviews, and I've seen a lot of people that were ultimately disappointed with this version of the movie. And I don't really get why you would be disappointed, because if you understand what Sylvester Stallone was going for here, and you don't try to compare it to the theatrical cut too much, and you take it at its own merits, I think over time you'll enjoy it just as much, if not more, than the theatrical cut, because it's more in line with what Stallone intended for it to be from his perspective. And Integrity 101 says, I disagree. I thought almost everything that he cut from the theatrical was fat that needed to be trimmed. Integrity also says, I would encourage fans that love Rocky 4 to simply make their own hybrid cut. It's pretty easy. And PKL says the new version is actually disjointed. I feel there was a mandate to stick to 90 minutes. This is why the newer changes didn't flow as well.
Hmm.
I don't know, man.
Disjointed in what way?
I didn't think it was disjointed at all. To be honest with you, I don't understand how you would use the word disjointed with regards to this movie. This movie actually, as Johnny pointed out earlier,
I would say it's paced a little slower, but disjointed.
yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't.
paced a little slower and it flows a lot better with the first three films. If you watch Rocky 1 through 3 and then you watch this, it fits right in there. Like, you're not like, at no point are you watching, if anything, having watched them side by side now, I would say that Rocky 4, the theatrical cut, stands out much more now, because when you watch Rocky 4, the theatrical cut, it it kind of it still fits, but like, again, it's more like a comic book. It has more of a comic book feel, has more of a fantastic feel to it. It doesn't feel real like this one. I feel like the difference between this movie and the theatrical cut is one word, and that's realism. I don't know. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but as someone who, you know, has digested these films my whole life, I feel like uh yeah, if I'm watching and I just want a complete Rocky and I just want the movies all to flow better, I think this is the one. I think this is what you would do if you want it to flow together in a nice like a nice river kind of a thing. I don't know. I don't know, Johnny. I'm kind of at a loss there because I just don't see how anybody could see that movie and think it was disjointed. I mean, my God, uh, wow, it really. I think it
Yeah, like I
I think
said,
it
I
fits like a glove with the rest of the movies. To be honest with you, like it's kind of like I don't know. It's weird to me. I don't know.
yeah, I don't see it. Like I said, like it's paced a little slower, but I wouldn't consider that making it disjointed.
And Integrity 101 makes a great point here. He says, I watched both films to get ideas for a possible hybrid fan edit, and I was struggling to find anything from the theatrical version that needed to be reinserted into this director's cut. That, exactly. That right there. Like, taken on its own merits. If you never saw, and I love the point that Johnny made, because if you never saw Rocky 4, okay, and you just watched, if you were like Geek Studios and you just started watching the Rocky movies, and in lieu of watching the original 80s version of Rocky 4, you watched this version instead and then just continued on, I think you almost could, and I think you could actually get away with doing this now. Watch Rocky 3, watch the director's cut of Rocky 4, skip Rocky 5 entirely, and just go right to Rocky Balboa. And I think you've got the Rocky movies in a nice little package.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean that's kind of how I would do it. Now if I was watching, if you're going to be more of a purist and you want to watch all the Rocky movies, I would do all the Rocky movies, including the theatrical cut of Rocky 4, watch the theatrical Rocky 5, and then watch Rocky Balboa. Consider that one timeline, and then watch, and then if you want it to flow better, watch Rocky 1 through the director's cut of 4, and then just skip to Rocky Balboa and the Creed movies, and consider that a separate timeline.
Interesting
That's
take. Yeah, that's an
that's
interesting
kind of how
take.
I would do it. Like, like how they have all these different timelines for like the Halloween movies and stuff.
God.
I'm kind of looking at it like that. Like because you could, and if you do it like that, in the original timeline, you don't include the Creed movies. You keep the Creed movies out, and you just watch all the original theatrical cuts of Rockies, one all the way up to Balboa. And then in the second timeline, when you watch, if you watch the director's cut of Rocky 4, then you include the Creed movies, because to me, the Creed movies make a lot more sense with this cut of the movie. Like, you get a lot more emotion, you get a lot more of a sense of, and I don't know about you, but I was blown away by the Apollo funeral scene in this movie. I thought that was incredible. Like, how do you cut all that stuff out?
I'm not sure, but yeah, no, I thought that was really good. Like, with what the trainer says about the whole warrior thing, yeah, that's pretty gangsta.
And Integrity says, PKL, remember, if you've seen film plenty of times and it's changed, of course it'll feel jarring at first. Each scene has a new cadence, so the audience is out of sync with what they're expecting. Exactly, which is why you have to watch it. You have to go into it independent of the original. And I know that's hard to do because the original is so ingrained, but you got to watch it as its own thing. You got to remember, this is a movie that came out originally in 1985. Okay, we're in 2021. So getting a new cut now of this movie that is just that feels fresh and new, I didn't think was possible. I'm like, how was he able to do that? And somehow, it happened. It's incredible. Integrity 101 says this is why a beloved film with drastic changes in a new cut often needs to be viewed a few times to be given a fair shake. I agree. I'll never watch the theatrical again, probably. Not hating. I loved it, always loved it, but I'll be grabbing Rocky versus Drago every time. See, and I get that. I can get that now because like we were saying, integrity, it's like it fits in it fits in so much better with the previously established films. And that's why, that's why what I was trying to do by giving you what my timeline would be if you were going to do that. Like I said, I would skip Rocky 5 altogether because none of the events in Rocky 5 in the theatrical cut of Rocky 5 are ever referenced again. So you don't really need that at all in this timeline. And this version of Rocky 4 does such a good job of connecting with the other films that you really, it makes sense. You could go from this to Rocky Balboa and be completely fine and go into the Creed movies. It just makes so much, it just feels very organic to me from this point. And PKL Entertainment says it's hard to explain in chat, but if you retain the theatrical cut with the additional scenes, then that would give you a definitive version of the film. I'm not sure though, because there were changes made to this version that you wouldn't really be able to do that. Like for example, the ending. The ending is different. And I think the ending is better. But I don't think that the ending that we got in this movie is the ending that would have been appropriate for 1985, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think the ending for the theatrical cut was great for the time, and it had that rousing, American patriotism kind of thing going on, and you really get that feeling. And then you got the kids back at home in America watching it on TV, and you got the speech was more dramatic. But if you get rid of that and you go with the ending that we got in this movie, it feels like a different film. It feels almost like it almost feels like a different continuity, because here he still gives the same speech, but it's different. Has a different impact. It has a different impact on the people. It has a different impact on the political element, and then it has a different impact on Drago. There's actually a scene that I thought was pure gold, and I was glad it was in there. There was a scene where Rocky actually goes over to Drago and they kind of touch gloves, like in a friendly way, almost like a great match, like a mutual respect.
Yeah, till the end.
And I thought that was fantastic. I thought once again, it humanized Drago on a level that we never would have gotten in the 80s, because in the 80s they wanted him to be completely robotic because they were trying to show the
original version was a propaganda film.
It was a propaganda politicized propaganda piece. Whereas now in 2021, it didn't have to be that. It could be something else. It could evolve in a sense, again, to be more in line with the other films and to and again, humanizing Drago. I think there's actually people that would be against the idea of humanizing Drago in the way he was humanized in this film, because really when you see this, you no longer are looking at it like, oh my God, we just want this Frankenstein monster to be defeated. It's like you actually feel for the character.
A little bit. I mean, he's still a total little dick and still takes things way too far. I mean, he's still a villain, but like you see that he's been manipulated and molded, and he's just a tortured little bastard in it. And yeah, in a way, you feel bad for him, but like I wouldn't say that like I rooted for him or anything. You know what I mean? But they did give him a human element. I wouldn't say they humanize him, but like he's not just like you said. He's not just a robot like yeah how he was portrayed in the original one, which was your typical American look at a Soviet person. You know what
He
I
was
mean?
he was yeah,
In
he
the
was
80s.
almost like the Terminator in the theatrical cut, where there was no personality, there was no human trait. It was just raw, you know, raw rage and power and nothing else, just brutality. Whereas here, you get the idea that, yeah, he knows he's being controlled. He's got to watch what he says, like you pointed out. He's very, there's things he wants to say, and you actually get that from this cut of the movie. There's things he
Well, that
wants to say.
he's got a respect for Rocky. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
He does want to beat his ass and have the privilege of saying that he did that, but he wants to do it like a fighter. He doesn't want to do it for Russia type of thing, which
Right.
I think they portray really well, even though he never actually says the words. I mean, he barely says anything in the film, but it's probably some of Dolph's strongest acting ever. Period.
Indeed, indeed. And I mean, and it actually gives new like life to the lines in the movie, where in between rounds where he's saying, oh, where you hear Dolph Lundgren saying he's not human, he's like a piece of iron. All of these things are very human things to say, but the way it was portrayed in the theatrical cut, you're not really seeing it like that from his perspective, because you're like, well, he's just a robot. He's just a robot that needs to be defeated. There's nothing about him. But here you actually get the idea that no, this is just a man, just like any other fighter, and he's expressing his grief and his the disparaging elements of the challenge that he has before him. And like you said, he respects Rocky as a fighter, and he wants to be uh, seen as a real fighter. He wants to be a champion, and he wants to defeat Rocky for himself, not for Russia, not for his ridiculous wife, not for anything else, but for himself.
Well,
He's a fighter.
they made his wife even a little humane as well. There's a scene where she looks over at Adrian and they kind of share like a little smile at each other, you know what I mean? So in this new version, which I didn't think was antagonistic between the two of them. It was actually kind of like a hey, what's up, you know?
I think that the one scene that I would have, if there's any scene from the theatrical cut that I would have liked to have seen in this cut that they cut out, it was the scene between Drago's wife and Apollo's wife, where she walks up to Drago's wife walks up to Apollo's wife and says, "I hope after this, we can be friends. They're not military men. They're not combatants. They're sportsmen." Like, I wish that scene was still there, because I feel like that was kind of an impactful scene, and it was a short scene too. And I also liked in the fight between Drago and Apollo, they made it a little bit less like Apollo was just a punching bag. In this cut, Apollo actually at least tries to put up a little bit of a fight. There's a few scenes in there where he actually does get in a couple punches. He does try to fight back. He's not just a human punching bag getting demolished and destroyed by Drago. He still gets destroyed, don't get me wrong. It's not like it was a totally different there was totally different fight choreography, but there was more of Apollo, and it wasn't just him getting his face smashed in. Your thoughts on that, Johnny?
Yeah. It just really worked.
And PKL Entertainment says, "Can I ask what parts would all would you all take out from the theatrical version?"
None. Actually,
None.
like we said, I like the theatrical
I
one.
like the theatrical version.
Sylvester Stallone had a problem with it, and he made a different version that I happen to think was really good too. That's all I'm saying. Like I
Yeah,
wouldn't be like, bitch, I hated this movie and I want to cut all this stuff out of it. Like I'm not saying that at all. The
right,
theatrical movie is amazing. You know what I mean? I've
right. It's
watched
like,
it since I was a child, little baby
yeah,
child.
watched it since I was 8 years old. I can't really freaking. All I know is that PKL. It isn't about parts that we would take out. It's just that now you have two distinctive versions of the same story to enjoy, and you can pick and choose which one you want to watch under whatever circumstances. I mean, remember, this is what we were talking about earlier. This is a movie that nobody asked for. We didn't ask for Stallone to do this. It wasn't like there was a big fan campaign, hashtag release the slide cut. There was none of that. It's not like it was a troubled production. It wasn't like Stallone directed it. He wrote it. It was all his brainchild. It wasn't taken away from him. So this to me just feels like him evolving as a filmmaker and feeling like he could do something new and in his mind a little better this time around. Now, as far as whether or not
It actually is better. I
it
mean, that's
actually
up
is
to you
better,
to decide.
that's subjective. I mean, I can't even, because to me I can't even say, because again, Rocky 4 as a movie, the theatrical cut is ingrained in my brain. So I can't say that, this version supplants it, but what I can say is that
It's good.
depending on depending on how I choose to watch the movies, this is going to be one of my preferred options for watching Rocky 4, because I just think it fits in so much better with how this franchise is as a whole. I don't know. Integrity says Rocky versus Drago is much more about Rocky and Apollo's friendship. This is why the Rocky 3 scenes were extended. In the beginning, it wasn't just a recap. It was putting the origin of their friendship into the film. And Integrity also points out, if you think a 2-hour version of Rocky 4 would be best, just keep your eyes peeled online. Someone will make it soon enough, guaranteed. Yeah, there'll be some. I already know there'll be some ambitious fan editor that'll come in and will attempt to do that. It will happen at some point. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are nitpicking about. Like, they didn't like the fact that the original opening from the theatrical cut was cut out with the American and the Russian gloves colliding. They didn't like that was taken out. A lot of people took issue with the fact that Stallone took out the fight between Rocky and Apollo, the little private fight that they had, that was the beginning, the very end of Rocky 3, and then put in so much of Rocky 3 but cut that out in the recap situation. But to me it didn't matter, because Apollo and Rocky's friendship, like Integrity is saying here, was on full display here. You realized the depth of that friendship. You realized how important that friendship was to the story. So I don't, so I took no issues with that kind of thing. I thought it's just like another version of a good movie, and it's just a good movie regardless. So I can't. That's why I can't say that it's necessarily better than the theatrical cut, but I can't say that it's not good in its own right. I feel like it's its own separate thing, and you kind of got to treat it as such.
Yeah, I mean it's extra surprise on top that actually turned out to be rather rewarding in my opinion because I really wasn't looking forward to watching this movie. You know what I mean? Like I like Rocky.
Wow.
When we were talking about Rocky versus Rambo, I'm Rambo all the way. I like Rocky fine, but like a new version of Rocky 4, I was just kind of like, but I thought it was pretty interesting to see that like he took different takes of the film and he drastically made in a way a different film, but it's very much the same film, and it's a very neat way to look at what you could do with film, what's possible, um, with different eyes looking at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And if you watch the making of this with Sylvester Stallone, you'll also see that this just goes to show you what this pandemic has done. So Stallone had a lot of free time on his hands. He had a lot of time to reflect on this and to look at this movie with a new set of eyes, with a matured filmmaker set of eyes, and to say, okay, I want to do this and this, and he went in a lot of depth. If you watch that making of it is about as long as Rocky Four. If you watch that making of, I think it's like an hour and a half, and maybe slightly longer, but he really goes into a lot of depth about why he made certain changes, what he was looking for, what he wanted to do before, what some of his regrets were in regards to Rocky Four in the first place, and it really is fascinating to see how he has evolved over time, and like I said, whether you think this is not as good as the theatrical cut, or you think it's like on the same level or whatever, or you didn't like it at all, I gotta admire the man for going in there and taking a stab at something that nobody really was asking for. Because this is I because when directors are able to do stuff like this, it's like the new cut that came out, the recent recut or director's cut or final cut of Godfather 3.
Oh
Um,
man, are they still cutting on that piece of turd?
he
Like, I don't
did a
think you'll
new
ever make that
he did a
watchable.
new he did a new cut of it, and actually changed the name of it, calls it The Death of Michael Corleone Coda. He doesn't even call it Godfather 3. And I mean, it's like you're, I don't know how I would describe that in comparison to this, but it's nowhere near as good as this is. Let's just put it that way. This right here is very enjoyable and does not take anything away from the theatrical cut. You can still watch the theatrical cut. You can still enjoy the theatrical cut. And now you just have another option that just happens in our opinion to fit in very well with the existing films. So I guess
Right.
it just depends on what you're in the mood for at the time. If you're watching the movie straight through and you get to Rocky Four, I guess that's really all it's going to come down to at that moment is, I mean, am I
Yeah, do
more
you
in
do
the
you
mood for
feel like
total 80s?
goofy
Do I want
80s
a
nostalgia or
robot? Do I want a robot or not?
what-
Uh,
you want all that 80s nostalgia and propaganda, or do you just want to watch a straight up boxing film? That's the two choices you'll
And
have.
PKL responds to integrity and says that he can agree on that. He's considered doing a fan edit himself. He says, if I can find enough time. Integrity says the whole Rocky 3 recap really highlights the parallels between Rocky and Apollo. They both get knocked out, lose their title in front of their wives, screaming, "Stop the fight!" PKL says trying to humanize Drago is a mistake. His lack of emotion is what made him so impactful. Yeah, but
If you like that comic book feel, see, that's what me and Zod were talking about. The original version was so over the top and so fantastical, where you would have a villain that was just this machine, like a James Bond villain, whereas like in real life, he's just athlete. He's a boxer that was trained, and he'd probably be a kid that like looked up to somebody like Rocky, even though he couldn't admit it. So, I, I guess if you want more fantastical element, like you would need to have Drago be a robot. But some people, and I'm one of them, I liked the scene where like he really wanted to try to talk to Rocky, but like he knew he'd get in trouble if he did.
Yeah, yeah. There were so many scenes like that too. There were so many little nuances where Drago kind of just had these situations where you could just tell that at any moment he would love to have just jumped up and started speaking. Like he had the thing is he had things he wanted to say, and it's just funny because it's like he was being muzzled, and this kind of felt to me like it was far more realistic. Again, that's why I say the big difference between this cut and the theatrical cut is realism. I feel like if the fight were real between Drago and Rocky, it would be more this would be more of how it would actually be. Drago would be more human in that he would have responses, he would have things he would want to say. Uh Responses. He would act more like a man and less like a robot. And it's you actually get to see that there's some emotion in this character. Not a whole lot, but enough to where you don't just see him as a straight up villain. You see him as someone who yeah, like when Johnny pointed out about being, you could see him almost as a kid who would look up to Rocky under the right circumstances. And again, this is such it's so amazing to me that you can have like almost, I don't want to say night and day difference, but just in the way that the material is presented, the differences are like are really really stark in some instances. And Integrity points out Rocky and Apollo won the title back together, but unfortunately for Apollo, he's struggling with retirement and he wants to get that fire back his friend has. So they really emphasize the friendship. And Skywalker says, just tuned into the film. Haven't seen the movie yet. Is it worth watching? And how much would you say it adds to the original? I think it's its own thing, Skywalker. I think if you watch it and you're a fan of
Yeah,
Rocky
definitely
4,
watch it
you'll
and then
like it.
decide if you like it better than the original, or if you like it as much as the original. Because like I'm not saying that I have a preferred one. Like it might come down to mood. You know what I mean?
I think that's all it comes down to be honest with you. I think they're both very, very competent and enjoyable films. I love them both for different reasons. And I think that it is just a matter of mood. It's not even a question of one being better than the other at all in this instance, if that makes any sense. I mean, it's just I don't know. I like them both, and I could almost say at this point, if I didn't have Rocky for the theatrical cut ingrained in my brain, I could almost say at this point, and maybe after a few more viewings of this director's cut, I could say this, that I like them both. I like them both equally. But I think from a film perspective and from a movie perspective, they are both very, very good and competent movies, and you would do well watching either one. I don't think you'd be disappointed either way.
Agreed.
And PKL says Sly took out nearly all of Bridget's lines, didn't he? Well, that's the interesting thing. She didn't have a whole lot of dialogue in the movie to begin with, and that's why that's like the one thing that I was irritated that he took out the line where he says she when she talks to Apollo's wife before the fight, to
That's that bad blood, though, man. It
come off
happens.
come off as friendly and stuff. But yeah, she's actually gone on record as saying that Stallone was a horrible husband and all this stuff. He probably wanted as little of his ex-wife in the movie as possible. He probably, if he could have gotten away with cutting her out completely, I'm pretty sure he would have, just from an emotional standpoint. But you know, but I don't know. I don't think the stuff that the stuff that he cut out was really all that bad. Again, you don't really lose all that much. I think that one scene would have been nice for it to be in there, but beyond that, I really had no issues with the changes he made, to tell you the truth. Integrity says, PKL, if you're just doing a simple re-edit, no special effects, you can do it in a day or two. I just made a fan edit of Blow from 2001 with 17 extra minutes. Took a couple of hours. That's it. And Integrity points out Skywalker Zod is doing spoilers. The only thing I disliked was the end in the ring when Stallone jumps in the air and Duke grabs him and he spins around.
The funny thing about that is
ballerina.
he jumps too soon and the dude almost misses him. That was the funny thing about that particular take that they used, because I was like, oh man, he almost landed bad on that. It was pretty funny actually. I see what you're saying though. It didn't look graceful in my opinion. It looked a little amateurish, but like Zod said, realism, man. I bet you boxers wouldn't have that stuff down like dancers, you know what I mean?
Right. It felt more real. That felt more real. Like, yeah, okay, he just had a fight where he's probably got decades worth of brain damage now because of this fight, and you think he's gonna do a perfect and graceful celebration.
Dude, just in the first minute of the fight, how many shots to the dome does he take? I mean, and I know that they're doing studio punches and stuff, but man, just filming
he had to go. Remember, he had to go to the hospital because he was hit so hard. These were real hits he was taking.
Yeah, man, he gets rocked in this.
I mean, this movie is not. I mean, it's not a. That's the thing about this movie. And he actually points this out in the making of Director's Cut. He talks about how these hits were real. How he had to go to the hospital, and as soon as he was released from the hospital, he went back to filming, and he said they could never. He even went as far as to say they could never do this. They could never do this today. They could never do it. It's just too much. It was too real. There was too much realism. And again, that's why I say, if you're hitting that hard and you're really going all in like that, this director's cut was warranted, just on the basis of the physicality of this fight alone. The director's cut was warranted because the fight is a lot more realistic, and he toned down the sound effects of the impact of the shots too, so the shots sound more real, like a real boxing match, rather than sounding like a Mack truck every time Drago comes at you and hits, like it's done. Again, the biggest difference I could say is it's like the theatrical cut comes off more like a fantasy, like a comic book, and the director's cut comes off more like a real boxing story, like you could really, you could buy into it more. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, again, and it, like I said, doesn't take anything away from the theatrical cut, but I mean, really, you're more invested, and it just feels more real, and there's more emotional weight, and all the points, Integrity is made about the friendship between Apollo and Rocky. It's all on display here in a very, very viable and understanding way, and it just makes a lot of the stuff just makes total sense to me. And Skywalker says, thanks for the heads up, Integrity. Rocky 4 has always been my favorite from the franchise. I'm happy to hear it sounds like it was good. Oh yeah, if it's your favorite in the franchise, you'll enjoy it. You will. You're not gonna, and that's one of the things that I love so much about this, that again, it doesn't take away from what we got. It just adds a new layer to it and gives you a different, you know, different color grading, gives you more realism, gives you a little more depth of character in Drago and a few other characters, and you're just kind of, you know, left to say, well, wow, this is actually really nice. This is actually a fun experience. And PKL says, I also didn't like the glove sequence being taken out. It changes like that. It's changes like that which were unnecessary. Well, I really feel like PKL, the reason that was changed is because he had to change the whole title sequence.
Yeah. He had to add the subtitle now.
Right. I don't think that it necessarily was because he wanted to get rid of that. It just felt more like you got to differentiate it from the theatrical version. You got to have enough. And again, I liked the original sequence. I liked the original cut, the two boxing gloves. I thought that's brilliant. That's a beautiful sequence. It should be there. But again, you know, you're talking about a director's cut. You're talking about a director's pet project. He's doing his thing. I don't know. Integrity says, spoiler, my favorite new line of the film was at the end when Rocky tells the ref that's trying to stop the fight with Drago, so Drago wins by default. I didn't come this far to end this fight sitting down. Yeah, I thought that was good too.
And go ask Drago, he's hurt too. Yeah, man, yeah. Drago, he had like the big old swollen ass eyes, and but he was standing up while Rocky was sitting down. So I guess maybe that's why the ref didn't go ask him. But yeah, that was such a bullshit part. Like anyone's gonna be like, yeah, stop the like. Yeah, it was a good quote though. I agree with you entirely.
And PKL, I really like you know, the fact that you're having a real a healthy conversation with us about this, and your takes are different than ours, and I'm enjoying
Terminator
this a great deal.
Terminator is about robots from the future, like military robots from the future that come back to murder each other, whereas Rocky is a sports film about human boxers. Like they're not going to have the same type of emotional skill sets. Like they're going to be more human. Just saying.
Yeah, and again, we also have to remember that the original film from 1985 was more of a propaganda piece. We have to remember that. So they're going to make the Russians at that time, they're going to make Drago more of a robotic Frankenstein-ish character, because that was the way the American government at the time wanted Russians to be depicted. So you're getting more of so that was what it was. Like, they're the Terminators. They're the ones that are going to come in here and disrupt everything. They're the ones that want to kill us. That's essentially, that's 1980s. The whole idea of a nuclear war, a whole idea of a nuclear war between the United States and Russia was the underlining subtext of that movie. And if you don't, and if you didn't know that, that's why a lot of that was the way it was. That's why Stallone couldn't do the things that he wanted to do with this version then, because if you try to humanize, our global adversary at the time, if you try to humanize, you can't humanize that. You have to make them as robotic and evil and as, just, devoid of humanity as possible. And that was the goal. And that's one of the reasons why it turned out that way. So when you humanize them now you're looking at it, through a real world aesthetic. Now Stallone is doing it the way he always wanted to depict Drago, but couldn't back in the 1980s. So the idea was then Drago's a comic book villain. He's devoid of emotion. He's completely robotic. He's the Terminator from Terminator 1. Again, death from above. You have all of this. You have all of these references that are thrown in that were so 80s and so just iconic and indicative of
That time, yeah.
that time period. So so this is what you have to how you have to look at it. This movie, this is a version of the movie that's being cut from the
To be
perspective
timeless,
of
that's not
now.
supposed to just be relevant to its time. Like this version is meant to be more timeless because we don't see the Soviets like that anymore. We've moved on. There's other threats, and we don't even portray them as evil robots in cinema. So, like, why
Right.
should we, still depict the Russians like that?
Perfectly said. Perfectly said, man. Yes, exactly. There's no point to that now. Now you just want to you just want to make it, you know, you want to be fair about it. And I don't know. This is why even the ending to the movie was like, I don't know, it felt more real. The ending felt more realistic to me too. All of it did. Like, they didn't no longer had the kids watching the fight on TV, and they ended it in a more
They cut out all that patriotic crap. Just go ahead and say it like it is,
yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to word it a certain way, but you're right. Yeah, all the patriotic stuff was gone pretty much. Even the way he delivered the speech felt underwhelming and less and more real in terms of how a boxer who had just literally gotten his brain concussed would actually sound. It wasn't so like upbeat and more. I mean, it just
Well, it
had a
felt
more
more
real
like
world tone.
Rocky, because the whole thing about Rocky was he was this simple guy who was good at getting hit, who was able to, change his life and change the world for the people around him, and he was able to do that on a way larger scale in this version. And I feel like in this version, it was more like the actual real Rocky from the original films being able to pull that off instead of him ascending to being Superman now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Integrity points out here. I understand the appeal in the lack of emotion in Drago. For me, though, I liked tweaking Drago a little, so he is both villain and victim. Plus, it's a new cut. Why not try something different? Exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. I mean, if you're gonna go through all the trouble of recutting a movie that is beloved, that nobody asked you to do this again. It's kind of a passion project for Stallone. He's going to throw in everything that he wanted to do, and yeah, he's going to try different things, and some things are gonna work for certain people. Some things aren't going to work, but as a fan of this franchise, this movie worked for me. I highly recommend it. I can't say enough positive things about it. I think it is on the level. I think it fits. I think it belongs. I don't think that it takes anything away from the theatrical. And the best part is it's not trying to. It's not trying to supplant the original. You can still watch the original all you want, and it's not going away. Nothing's happening. Stallone's not trying to be like George Lucas and erase the originals from existence. He's just giving you his updated vision for Rocky Four, which I think is admirable. And Integrity says Terminator One is definitely better. That film has great fan edited cuts also. And PKL, it says there are extended cuts. Terminator 1 definitely doesn't need an alternate cut. Movie is perfect. Igor says, I only watched Rocky 1, 2, and Rocky Balboa. Now, 3 was silly between Hogan and Mr. T, and 4, there's no way the Russians would actually have started chanting Rocky, and Rocky 5 was awful. Rocky 1 is still the greatest sports movie of all time. I don't know,
Yeah.
Igor. I think
Slapshot.
Igor,
Slapshot's the
I-
best sports movie of all time.
Igor, I think you should give this director's cut of Rocky 4 a watch. your opinion may change, because this version of Rocky 4, I think, fits in with the original films. It really does. It kind of, to me, harkens back a little more to the first Rocky movie. And there's also the added layer of the strengthening of the relationship between Adrian and Rocky in this movie that isn't really, uh, you know, isn't as strong as like it should have been. And I think in this movie it's done really well. And again, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that just makes sense in universe and in continuity. And I don't know. I don't know. I think, and this is another a good question. And I'm glad you've said this. You said this, Igor, because for someone like you that only, that appreciates Rocky 1, 2, and Rocky Balboa, I think you would like this movie. I think for people that didn't really like the 80s cheesiness of the theatrical cut or didn't find it realistic, I think they would enjoy this a lot more. What about you, Johnny? What do you think?
I do. I think that if you liked the first films, you'll like this one. Your biggest pet peeve is still in the film, and I gotta agree with you. There may not have been actual real Russians that would have stood up and cheered for Rocky, but there would have probably been some who wanted to. But like in the heat of the Red Scare in 1985, yeah, you'd just be too afraid of your life to actually get up and do it if you lived over there.
But
Just
I
saying.
love, and that this is why the ending to this movie makes so much more sense. The new ending just feels so much more legit. I would take
It's a little
just
less bullshit than legit, I will say.
yeah, I would actually take this ending. I actually would take this ending over the theatrical ending if I'm going for a more realistic take. I think it just works. PKL says the likes of RoboCop and Scarface too have cartoonish '80s moments, but that's what makes them special. Just like Rocky Four. Yeah, I agree, and like I said, I can't take anything away from the theatrical cut because I love the theatrical cut.
Well,
But
we're
this
huge
one,
80s fans here. I mean, I
right?
grew up in the 80s. I was born in 1981. Like, we love the Karate Kid, and you catch
And
us on another week, we'd be
Ghostbusters. I mean, on another week, we're going to talk about. I think we're gonna save our Ghostbusters Afterlife discussion for another week because I'd really like to talk to you about that. I don't know, Johnny, if you had a chance to see that
no,
movie yet, but
I ain't going to the
oh
theaters. Like,
my God,
I'm still getting over having regular COVID. You think I want to catch Robotron or whatever the new version's called?
Robotron. Robotron 2084 here, folks.
But like, dog, ain't nobody trying to say that like 80s stuff ain't rocking, man. Like it's great, and like I'm a huge fan of it too. It's just that this was a very fun, interesting take of the film that we both happen to enjoy, and none of us are shitting on part four. So like, I don't know what you're even arguing with us about, RKL or PKL.
Yeah,
Tell you the
yeah.
truth.
Part four, regardless, and that's why we're sitting here telling you we can't say that this version is better than the theatrical cut
I mean,
unless you're
integrity will
someone.
tell you that, but we won't. I mean, like, there are people in the chat saying that, but like, me and Zod pretty much agree with you on most of what you're saying, but we just happen to like the other version as well.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I can't even say as a personal preference that I would prefer to watch the director's cut over the theatrical cut. And I think, like me and Johnny were saying earlier, it all just depends on your mood at the time. But if you're like Igor and you like the realism of of Rocky 1 and 2 and Rocky Balboa, and you were not a fan of the like cartoonish elements, you will like this cut a lot more. This cut is this cut is tailor made for those people, which is why I say for me, I would watch Rocky, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, watch this version of Rocky 4, and cut straight to Rocky Balboa. And you
just
have
don't watch Rocky 5, period. It's a terrible film.
Right. You don't need Rocky 5 at all, unless Stallone goes back and makes an ultimate director's cut. And this is the funny part. I'll never understand, like, if he was going to go back and do a director's cut of a Rocky movie, why he didn't do 5. 5 was the worst one. So why wouldn't you try to redeem that one by...
Yeah, it would be like doing a director's cut of Nightmare on Elm Street 3, you know what I mean? Like the Dream Warriors, everybody's favorite one.
Everybody loves that movie, and you're gonna release the Craven cut of that. And it's just kind of like, listen, I got no problem with the fact that he did this. And I think this is one of the reasons, maybe this is another reason, why he did this, because this one is so popular. That this one had the best chance of being successful, because this was a movie that people already loved. So now you're doing a director's cut, and people like director's cuts, and now so I can't, and now seeing the final product, I can't argue with it. I can't sit there and say, well, no, he never should have did it, because I think it was good, and I think it was worthwhile, and I'm actually glad that he did it. I like this cut a lot. I mean, it's hard to argue with some of the decisions he made here.
Igor, my man, now you're speaking my language.
Igor, Terminator never needed a sequel. It has the perfect ending.
To that.
T2, though, its sequel has great effects, but the kid's sidekick and one-liners and the melting thumbs up, and he says here, Slapshot is the greatest hockey film and sports comedy. Rocky is the GOAT because he doesn't even have to win. It's about going the distance, with the champ. And Igor says, I'll give it a watch. Oh, that's great. I hope you do. And I hope you like it, Igor. I hope you do. I'd be interested to hear what you think of Rocky 4 coming from the perspective of someone who actually doesn't like the theatrical cut. See, these are the people that I want to hear from. Not the people that, like us, Johnny, that have loved Rocky 4 our whole lives. I want to hear from people that didn't like Rocky 4 and watch this version now and see if that changes any opinions.
Yeah. That would be cool to maybe have Igor come back in a week or two and tell us what he thought. Maybe have him hop on with us with his
that'd be wonderful. That would be wonderful, Igor, to do like a follow-up with you and have you come on and talk about your experience with this director's cut. Because I don't know, as somebody who I asked my dad, because I watch a lot of movies with my father, and I said to him about the director's cut of Rocky 4, and his response to me was, he's like, I don't know, I'm on Rocky 12, so I'm not going to revisit that. It's like, so it's kind of like, there's been so many that you're just kind of like, okay, I don't know if I want to go back to Rocky 4. But I don't know. It was a worthy one, and it is actually my favorite of the sequels. So I kind of have to. So, like I said, I was excited for this. I really was. I was hyped for this. This is like my number of 2021. My favorite films of 2021 are, of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Rocky 4, the Rocky 4 director's cut, and Ghostbusters Afterlife. Those are so far my top 3. Go ahead.
It's on Shudder. It's called The Spine of Night. It is. It just came out. It's an animated film. It's actually rotoscoped like an old Ralph Bakshi film. It is amazing.
I love those. I love those kind of movies. I'm gonna have to check it out.
It's my top of 2021. I just watched it the other night, and oh, dude, it is so amazing. If you're a fan of like the original heavy metal film or like Fire and Ice or Wizards and shit.
I love those movies. I love all those movies.
Then check this out. This will be your Huckleberry, man.
What's the name of it again?
The Spine of Night.
Spine of Night. Okay, cool. I will look into it immediately after the show. And Igor says Stallone's girl Bridget was hot in Cobra. I agree. Now that's a movie that Stallone needs to revisit. We need to get that Cobra director's cut because that's been rumored for decades now. I
I
don't know
want to
about
do a
anybody else, but that's something that, my God.
yeah, because it wasn't it supposed to be more based off his original script of Beverly Hills Cop, right? Like he actually had a whole version of it filmed that was
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a whole different movie. It's like the Snyder cut. It's like night and day compared to what we actually
I
got.
need to see that because Cobra is legit my favorite Stallone action film. I already love it. So yeah, I want to see what the complete different version of it would be like, you know what I mean? And if I would actually like it.
Yeah, it's a completely different thing. It's a completely different animal. So, and PKL says I don't feel Rocky Five can be re-edited because the whole script is wrong to begin with. The problem with Rocky Five is that so much of it was cut out that you lose a lot of context. There's so much in this movie. I was like you. I was like you, PKL, in that way that I did not like Rocky Five at all. I still to this day don't consider it to be a part of Rocky canon because it's just so bad and doesn't fit in with anything. But the director's cut or the work print that's online that has the full picture where you're able to get everything in context and you actually get the whole story. You get a lot more. You get a lot more with Rocky and his son. You get a lot more of Tommy Gunn. You get a lot more of the. In other words, I don't want to say it's like a completely different movie, but to be honest, it's like a completely different movie. I mean, there's so much stuff that made no sense because of the cuts, because of the things that they did, because of the story. The story was very, very wonky. But if we got a director's cut and you know it was presented and released today, I think Stallone would work his magic and the movie would be regarded a lot better. I think I actually when I think about it, that's probably the movie he should have worked on. But since he knows that that movie's not regarded very well and that people didn't like it to begin with, why would you go back and re-edit something and recut something and add in the more scenes and stuff if nobody's going to watch the movie? Rocky 4 had the best chance to be successful because it was the most popular of the Rocky sequels. So, and it was the most monetarily successful of all the Rocky films. So, you kind of feel like if this worked and this was successful and people like this, maybe he will go back and give us a good version of Rocky Five. And I will say from the version that I saw, it is a good version of Rocky Five. It doesn't like reinvent the wheel, and it doesn't suddenly make Rocky Five a masterpiece, but it's a good version of it, and it actually makes it fit in more with the other Rocky movies, much like how this director's cut of Rocky Four fits in more organically with the existing films. And Igor says here, Wizards was amazing. Oh, I agree. And Igor says that car in Cobra, my God, yes, yes. And Arkham Gaming says, "Hi Zod, how are you doing? Pretty good. How are you, Arkham Gaming? Good to see you." And Igor says, "First Blood." And PKL Entertainment says, "Agree." Cobra definitely needs a director's cut. Cliffhanger and Demolition Man are Stallone's great actioners. But the problem with the director's cut for Cobra though, like I say, is it'll be a completely different movie. It's not going to be anything like what you got. It's going to be completely different. So more along the lines
Do
like
you
Johnny
think
was
he
saying of
might
like Beverly Hills Cop.
do you think he might play with Rambo Part 2 since somebody pointed out earlier that he made it the same year as Rocky Four, um, and he had to make so many concessions with it. It came out so much different than his other works. Do you think that maybe a Rocky Two director's cut, like the Rocky Four one, might be in the works? That would be very interesting to see.
I don't know. That would be interesting. I know he wants to make another Rambo movie. I know that.
Oh, he should. That last one was garbage, man.
I didn't like that last one at all, and I remember when you and I were doing the roundtable show, and we talked about it, and I remember I remember our partner at the time, Jackal, really loved that movie, and I couldn't understand why, because to me that was such a step down from the previous Rambo movie. I don't know how anybody could look at that movie and think that that was a good movie, that was a worthy sequel.
No,
It
yeah.
just felt to me like I felt like I'd seen that movie already, and it was done with Mel Gibson. It was called Bloodfather.
Or it was done with Hugh Jackman and it was called Logan. I mean, like, yeah, it was basically, yeah, it was just a really bad, really slow, all the action cut out of it version of Logan, really, or the Bloodfather. It was so action deficient, it was painful. It's like, is Rambo going? Oh, Rambo kills everybody at the very end of the film. Oh, that's how you're gonna do this one, especially after Part Four, where like it's just a continually just like tension building. Then you get like a really badass scene, then tension building. Like you get to what was the last one called, Last Blood or whatever, and oh my god, dude, like I
And
would.
Last Blood should have been all about Rambo in a wheelchair for all the action it had. I mean, honestly, it was a slug, and I don't know how anybody, Stallone included, thought it was a good idea. I was I was beside myself. It was the one movie in the Rambo franchise that I didn't like, and that's why. And again, like you said, coming off of John Rambo, that movie was despicable. That movie should not have been made. If that was, and that'll be tragic if that's the last one that we get, because that was so horrible. That's like, to me, that's the Rocky Five of this franchise.
Right, I thought Rambo 3 was the Rocky 5 of the Rambo movies, but like yeah, no, like he's like, you want to see me turn Rambo 3 into a masterpiece? Watch this one. And he
That's
did it.
exactly what happened. That's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. I mean, you're talking about you're not even exaggerating there. It's terrible. Like even now, like all of the think about all the iconic things to come out of Rambo 4, of John Rambo, all of the iconic things to come out of that film, even like, where he rips the guy's throat out, like how that was used later on in Mortal Kombat 11 when Rambo became a playable character, which Sylvester Stallone voiced, by the way,
That is so awesome.
which is so awesome. And again, you have to you have to wonder what he could have left in the tank for another Rambo movie at this point in his career.
I thought he died at the end of that crappy last one, so I'm surprised that they're planning a sequel. I thought that he literally died.
And we're down with the sickness. We have sickness in the chat. What's up, sickness? Sickness says, brother Zod and Johnny, what's going on? How you doing, man? I hope you are doing well. I hope life is treating you perfectly and you are in great spirits tonight. Glad you're here. This is kind of a different show for me and Johnny. We're just reviewing this film and we reviewed this Rocky film, and now we're just kind of mulling over some other films in Sylvester Stallone's illustrious career here, which is, again, this is a kind of a different show. It's definitely not what we normally do, but
Yeah, I
I
like it, and we made it a whole 2 hours on this topic without having to bring up the what you call it. So And
But I think it's appropriate though. I think
yeah.
this was warranted. I mean, this was a movie that, and I love how even how you said, you weren't really looking forward to watching this. I was like, wow, okay, sorry, Johnny.
Well, I didn't mean it like that. It wasn't something that I was particularly amped for. You know what I mean? It's not hard to get me to watch most things unless it's something really bad. You know what I mean? Like if you asked me to watch a Meg Ryan movie, then I'd really be like, Zod, you bastard, you're gonna have to pay back for this one. But like a Rocky movie, it's no problem, but it's not something that like ooh Rocky. Like I like it, but it's not. I'm not a big sports fan. You know what I mean? So sports films aren't tip top. If you asked me to watch like a ninja movie, that would have been a different story. I'd have been all over that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree, I agree. But this was, like, as I say, this is Rocky. This is iconic. This has a lot of it has a lot of appeal, a lot of generational appeal. So just to recap and kind of wrap up our thoughts on Rocky for the Ultimate Director's Cut. Uh, Definitely see it, even if you didn't like Rocky 4. In fact, especially if you didn't like the theatrical cut of Rocky 4, check out the Ultimate Director's Cut, because I think a lot of the criticisms of the theatrical cut of Rocky 4 were addressed in this cut of the movie. And it is, again, a more serious take, and it fits in nicely with the other Rocky films and doesn't feel as uh, as stuck in the 80s.
So, answering the question of the headline of this video, do you think it's a masterpiece or a misfire, Mr. Zodwriter?
I'm gonna say it falls, all things considered, it falls more along the lines of masterpiece than misfire for me.
Yeah, I think that it's for something that wasn't needed in the first place. It came out really handy. So, like, yeah, it'd have to fall into a masterpiece, even accidentally. You know what I mean? Just for the fact
For
that
being, yeah, for the fact that it even exists, it's an anomaly, and he was able to do what he did with it and actually make it so that it really didn't crap on the original, but it didn't take anything away from the original, but it managed to add to the mythology and again give it a more timeless feel, which I didn't really think was possible. I mean, because to be honest with you, I didn't know what to expect from this movie. I knew I would like it, and maybe I don't know, and maybe I was a little bit personally overhyped for it, but at the same time, for what it is, and when I say misfire or masterpiece, I'm not saying that you know this is the greatest, sports movie ever made. I'm not saying that it's like, I'm just saying that, when you take all of this into consideration and you look at what the movie was and what he managed to do to it now, and managed to in a lot of ways extend the longevity and the importance and the emotional resonance of it. Yeah, it falls closer to masterpiece. I got to give it to him. I didn't think it was possible for him to make me like Rocky 4 any more than I already do.
pow pow. Very well said all the way around.
I mean he's I don't know. But I would like to see him, actually would like to see him retackle Rocky 5. I want to see him do that, because Rocky 5 has such a bad reputation that if he were to recut it, if he were to do it, it can't be any worse than what we already have. So that's so that's and judging from what happened here with Rocky 4, I think if he wants a real challenge, yeah, if you want a real challenge, Sylvester Stallone, redo Rocky 5. That's what you need to do.
Well, at least with this one, he made something interesting enough that it's got people talking about it enough that if he did do a director's cut of Part 5, people would actually check it out. I'll actually watch it now.
Well, yeah, 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 because it again, when you add something, when you take something away and you add, but you add to the mythology and you don't completely try to wipe the theatrical cut from existence, you're going to get a lot of fan goodwill from that. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to hand it to you. You can still watch, your original theatrical cut in full HD. You're not losing anything, and you just have another option. And PKL Entertainment says, good stream and debate, guys. Thank you, PKL,
Yeah.
for coming in and sharing your take. I really appreciated that. We don't live in an echo chamber here, and I do like to see dissenting viewpoints and hear from people that just want to have a fun debate without personally attacking each other. So I really appreciated that. Appreciated you being here. You are welcome anytime. Thank you so much. And Igor says, the 80s movie I want to see a true director's cut of is Big Trouble in Little China. I heard
16-man bag is what they'll
I
call
heard
it.
some rumblings about that at one point, and I don't know
I
if
heard they
I'm
were going to
wrong.
remake it with Ronda Rousey, is what I heard. And I'm glad that never happened. So.
No, but I thought I heard something about a director's cut of this movie existing, like that there is one, but I don't know. I don't know. You know what I'm gonna do? I'll ask my buddy Bay Logan about that. I'm sure he knows. He's a big buff when it comes to Big Trouble in Little China. I'll ask him. Clive Barker's director's cut of Nightbreed is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, for
Yeah,
what it is, because it's basically cobbled together and it's still not complete to what he wants it to be. So, uh, and I don't think it'll ever will be because I think that footage, even if it does still exist, it's probably rotten somewhere, which sucks. But yeah, the version that we have is so good, which is a lot like Rocky 4 because I absolutely adore the theatrical version of Nightbreed 2. I watch both of them, pretty steadily, and I can't pick which one I like better to tell you the truth. Like David Cronenberg's just so good in both cuts as the evil psychiatrist.
yeah, yeah. Well, all in all, I think this was a very good stream. It was a different type of show for us tonight, but I think Johnny and I are gonna go ahead and wrap this up. We hope you've enjoyed our review of Rocky Four, Rocky versus Drago, the Ultimate Director's Cut. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And for those interested, the YouTube released Sylvester Stallone making of Rocky for the Ultimate Director's Cut. The link is in the description. That is an awesome thing to watch. It's a film class all in and of itself. So definitely check that out. Uh, Johnny, can you tell the viewers what they can expect from you coming up with Pink Buzz?
Yeah, tomorrow we're doing me and Joe. We're doing a review of Arcane with the Netflix show based off of League of Legends. We're basically just gonna fanboy over it, like everybody else, but it's that damn good. And then on Friday we're gonna have a guest. It's gonna be a German artist, or he lives in Germany. I'm not sure exactly what nationality he is. He is called EPHK. He is really a new voice in comics, really cool graffiti art style, and his graphic novel Mart Vallis is out by Image Comics. You can pick it up now. It is gorgeous. It's probably one of the coolest books that came out this year. And we're going to have him on to talk on Friday in the afternoon. So if you watch my show, that's what you could look forward to this week.
All right, and from me, what you can expect from this channel this week is tomorrow night. I have a late night Q&A at 9 p.m. Central Time, where I'm going to be featuring the irregular YouTuber, the irregular Neil. He's going to be joining me for late night Q&A, and then this coming Friday, I'm pleased to announce that I will be doing a second episode of late night Q&A during the week, where I will be featuring my guest, my friend Saggy Melons. She will be joining me for late night Q&A on Friday. So definitely be here for that, and definitely check out and subscribe to Graphic Vandalism. I would love to see Johnny Alpha reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year, because Johnny really deserves it. He does a lot of great content, and the Pink Buzz stuff is just getting better and better. So definitely check that out if you haven't had a chance. And please, again, please like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to me already, please do so. But more importantly, subscribe to Johnny. Subscribe to Graphic Vandalism, because he's awesome. And Integrity 101 says, nice talking, Zod. I gotta go. Lots of other channels are so upset I called them out that they are actually doing streams on little old me. Time to break out the screenshots. Talk to you later. Thank you, Integrity, for being here, man. You are always welcome here. I like your takes. I like the fact that you want to talk about all this great stuff. Keep doing what you're doing. Again, you're always welcome here. All of you are. It's fantastic. I appreciate so much the support. Thanks again. And Johnny and I will catch you guys later. Good night, everybody. Peace.